Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Joanne Mark Jones, and I'm the head of content here at Charity Digital. I'll be your host today, and we would like to welcome you all to the session. Please do introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from today, and have a talk amongst yourselves, and feel free to do so throughout the session. So first things first, a quick intro to Charity Digital. We are a UK charity, and our mission is to help other charities increase their impact by being more digital. A big part of how we do that is through content with articles, podcasts, and webinars that look at key issues facing the sector. Today's session is called A Guide to Co-Producing Services with Users and is presented by Jon Higgs, CEO of Mind in Camden. Co-producing services is a great way for service providers and users to work together towards a collective outcome, influencing change and achieving deeper impact in the ways that matter most. This session is designed to show charities the way forward with insight from Jon's experience at Mind. Jon will cover, among other things, the difference between co-production and co-design, what co-production services actually means, guiding principles that make co-designing services more successful, and much, much more. Now, before I hand over to Jon, I just wanted to share a few house rules. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to watch on demand within a week's time. We'll make the slides and resources available too, so don't worry if you've missed anything. And you can use closed captions for today's session. To enable these, in the bottom of the Zoom window, click the up arrow button, which is next to closed captions, and then click show subtitles. Final thing, during the webinar, please put your questions in the Q&A section. You can find that in the Zoom menu bar as well, and we will address these at the end of the session. You can upvote any questions that feel relevant to you. So if you click on the thumbs up icon, and we'll prioritize those at the end and make sure we answer the ones that get the most votes. And finally, if you do encounter any sound or image issues, let us know in the chat and we'll do our best to get the session back to normal as soon as we can. Okay, that's my intro done. So now I'm going to hand over to Jon. Jon, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jon Higgs. I am the CEO of Mind in Camden. I'm going to share my screen, fingers crossed. Hopefully, that looks okay to everybody.
It's still divided, Jon. So if
so we need to do that thing where,
yeah, just display settings, I think.
Display settings.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
Lovely. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Right. I'll crack on. Hello, I am Jon Higgs. I am the CEO of Mind in Camden. I'm part of the network of local minds, a federated charity. So as a national organisation, we have 100 local minds that spread themselves across England and Wales. Mind in Camden itself, as part of a federated charity, is still an independent, locally based charity, and we're based out of Camden. Obviously, the name says it all. We're a values-based organisation. We sometimes sit slightly aside from other organisations around mental health because we work with people who have severe mental illness, but we usually avoid categorising them within a medical context. So, for example, one of our primary values is that we see experiences such as hearing voices, seeing visions, having unusual beliefs, and experience anxiety, hopelessness, or extremes of moods as responses to real events, feelings, and cultural influences that people can identify in their own lives, rather than as delusions, hallucination, or symptoms of a biomedical disorder. Part of that process obviously means is that we, when the concept of co-production first arrived, it's something that we as an organisation embraced. I have only been here for 2 years though, so I can't take any credit for that embracing. But at the time I was working for National Mind, and we were developing the resources for local mind to co-produce and co-design services, and that's my background. So it's around a guide to co-producing. So this could be a session on co-production, or it might not be a session on co-production. And the reason I'm saying that is because of the definition of co-production that we see. And I've made a few assumptions here. So some of the session I'm hoping works for everybody all the time, but in some cases it might seem a little bit removed from what you may have been expecting. And the reason is because there are different concepts about what co-production is, and different organizations use the terminology for co-production to mean different things. So for me, from my background, I see the concept of the co-words breaking into three different distinct areas. There is co-design, which is an attempt to define a problem and then define a solution. And then there is co-production, which is the attempt to implement that proposed solution. And then co-creation is the process by which people do both. Now, all three are absolutely essential in the development of services with people who are likely to use those services. And it's important, though, that when you are going to go into a co-design production creation process, that you know one which is the one that is appropriate for any given project. And also the caveat, if at all, a lot of organizations use the term, we are going to co-produce this, or a commissioner will say, I want these services co-produced. And we often see with the NHS that we are going to co-produce this with patients. Often, that doesn't mean co-production. And often you don't need to co-produce something. Sometimes it just isn't something you need. And so part of this is to say, I strongly buy into the co-production concept and the co-design concept, but I also acknowledge that it doesn't have and work for everything. And I think if you are thinking about going down that route, have the courage to go, actually, I don't think this is a co-production piece of work. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a way of kind of identifying whether you feel that it is something can be co-produced or co-designed, or whether what you're trying to achieve on a particular project perhaps doesn't need it. And then finally, the kind of other thing that we're probably going to explore is who is the co. Often you will see organizations saying, especially commissioning organizations, we want this co-produced. And you may find that that is a way of saying, I want the service user at arm's length, so I'm going to commission an organization to work with the service user and then come up with something that I can then decide whether I want or not. And that isn't co-production or co-design or co-creation. The idea of co in all of those terminology means the people that are likely to be stakeholders within that service. And that will include commissioners, that will include staff, that will include people who use the services, and that will also include people who may use the services and currently aren't. The process is around identifying who those co's are and not be used as a way of distancing service users from the process of influencing the decisions that are made around the development of services. So whenever you're entering a co-design or co-production process, make sure that every stakeholder is involved. Otherwise, it becomes meaningless. So there are all sorts of examples of co-design. I'm going to use the terminology co-design rather than co-production, so I don't keep going co-design, co-production, co-design, co-production. Just because design is my background, co-design, and I just happen to use that term more because I feel that probably people are here because they want to look at the design process and the development of services and the rather than the actual implementation of that service at the end of the design process. So co-design can be done in small groups. So on the left-hand side at the top of the picture is a piece of work which is around access for older people to transport. And this is just a little piece of work that was being done with social care staff around bringing in the ideas that they saw, their people that they were working with, the problems that they were dealing with transport. And it was just a very, very small little session around getting their thoughts and processes, how they could influence the change of transport being delivered by the local authority. At the bottom, it's a much larger event that went on over a number of sessions, which was bringing charity leaders, staff and service users together to look at a problem around the development of support for people who had phoned 999 and were in crisis. And the bottom left-hand corner is that one of the resources that we use in the design process. And you'll see that in action in the next slide. Co-design, don't panic. If you do it right, you can involve anybody. And so here we have a really successful piece of co-design that happened between in an older person's charity and with primary school children. And it was an intergenerational project to design intergenerational spaces between for different generations in the London Borough of Brent. It was very successful. It produced an after-school club that worked with refugees around exploring different cultures and foods and children's activities. And that ran over a whole term, with the children coming in every afternoon on a Thursday and the older people joining them. This was the name badges that everyone was given. Once again, it's the principles of design. No one actually had a title, they just had their name, but each picture indicates something that person enjoys doing and likes. And it also can be done quite super seriously. So on the left-hand side are a group of people from a 999 service that are looking through some of the concepts that came out of the previous design work, which was around that we did with the other local charities around supporting people through 999 services. And this was the 999 call centre people from the Metropolitan Police area, just reviewing that to look to see if they can implement some of those ideas into their services. And on the left-hand side is an interesting piece of work where we hijacked a Department of Work and Pensions process to bring in people who had lived experience of mental health, about how the DWP could potentially make their offices more friendly and accommodating for people who had severe mental illness. And the latest thing that we're doing at Mind in Camden is the landing space. And this is specifically where we have a good example of where we have to separate the concept of co-production and co-design. We were asked by a group of a service user reference group if we could help them out, because they'd been asked by an NHS commissioner to come together and co-produce a response to staff concerns in secondary care services within Camden about the number of people that were returning to services. And they had been meeting up for a number of months and sitting around the table looking at each other, not really knowing what to do. And they were starting to get a little bit disenchanted with the whole process. We were asked if we could have any suggestions. So we went through a design sprint with them over a period of 6 weeks, and actually moved from co-production to saying, actually, this is a design process. And once people had kind of realized that they were responsible for the thought process around what is the problem we're trying to solve, and here is a potential solution, rather than coming up with a massive big idea based around a commissioner's desire to stop people returning to services. On the bottom corner there on the left-hand side, this is what they came up with, which is a service blueprint. This is a really interesting design tool, because what it does is it takes the user experience along the top line, and then it looks at each touch point where that user will come into contact with a service. It tracks what they experience front of house, what physical experience they have. It also looks at what that touch point is trying to achieve to maximize the service user's experience and make it positive. Then behind the scenes, what's happening backstage that the service user doesn't see, but is required to make sure that the front of stage action works. And then the supporting function that a service needs. This is a group of service users who are able to demonstrate that using a co-design methodology, working with staff and working with team managers are able to come up with a full-blown service blueprint, not just adding suggestions at the end of a consultation or having 5 minutes to discuss something around a table. They went through the full process. So we are going to talk a bit about co-design through the session, a little history then of co-design, just so that people get kind of an idea where it comes from. It comes from the Design Council just at the turn of this century. God, that sounds horrendous, doesn't it? And it's based on what's known as the double diamond principle. So as I said, at the turn of the century, the Design Council is saying this is a good way to do co-production. As you can see, there are varieties of that double diamond. It's all over the internet. You just have to Google double diamond. You'll find loads of stuff. And the double diamond based on two particular areas of the design process. On the first diamond, the first half of that diamond is the discover process, which is questioning the challenge and quickly leading to research to identify user needs. Then the second part of the diamond is the definitions phase, where you make sense of your findings and understand how the user needs and the problems align. And the result is to create a design brief. The first section of the second diamond is the third phase, connects onto developing, testing and refining solutions. And the final part of the diamond is the deliver phase. Now, this is great if you're a designer, but about 10 years ago when I was working for National Mind, we started to find this, that people just didn't quite understand the concept, and it was a confusing tool. Although delightful in the idea, it just wasn't something that people were kind of really getting to grips with if they didn't come from a design background. So we came up working with a number of local minds and service users with a slightly different variation. And so 10 years ago, we introduced to the third sector, not just to local minds, the concept of co-design based around 5 particular areas. And the idea is that within this 5 sectors are the 5 different places you need to visit to actually come up with a good co-designed service. And the first phase is the setup phase. And this is the area of where you are defining your problem that you are trying to resolve. You're potentially hoping to come up with some idea of what you would achieve if you actually were able to resolve that issue that you'd thought about. And then also in that setup phase is who are you going to be asking to be part of the design team. And so that process is quite short and sharp, but it's really important because you need to define the problem carefully. You need to dig deep into the problem, because you don't want to start your process by trying to actually design a solution to the wrong problem. The next stage along is the explore stage. And this is where, during this phase, the exploration into the problem, the deep dives into what actually is the crux of the issue, the interviews with people who have experience, the connection into research in other countries, other parts of the UK, that exploration phase that you're doing with your peer designers, where everybody involved in the design process is now part of that exploration. The next stage along is the generate phase. Now, that smaller triangle is not an accident, it's deliberate, because it is trying to show that the generate phase is not the important part of the process. The number of times that I've walked into organizations that are struggling with the design process or the service design, and what you see immediately is that they've started the process at the generate stage. They think they have a problem. They think they know about the problem. So they're going to just come up with some great ideas to resolve the problem. And inevitably, they're solving the wrong problem, or inevitably, they don't have enough information to come up with the right solution to that problem. So it's really important that we emphasize that the generate phase comes after the more important explore phase. The next phase is the make phase. That's actually the fun part. That's where we test the ideas out. That's where we Rather than pilot an idea, we may well just do a piece of work around piloting a few, prototyping a few ideas. That may be doing it on paper, that may be doing it with Lego models, that may be just testing out for a couple of weeks just to see if the idea works, because design is all about testing and learning through doing. And then obviously the final stage is the thing that we really want to make succeed, and that's where we start the service and we look to grow it. Now, why have we used the diamond still? Because the diamonds actually also demonstrate something really important. At each phase, you give people the space to go big without the restrictions and saying you can only look at this particular area or this particular area. You say go big. And so that first part, that first half of the diamond, you go large in the setup. Who are all the different people that we really want to work with? What are all the problems that we're trying to resolve? And then at the end of that, we come down to the crux problem, and we come down to a core group of people that we really want to be part of our design team. In the explore phase, we go massive. We go as far as the field as we can to get as much information as possible, and then we drill it down to those core elements that are going to guide us. The generate phase, as many ideas as we could possibly come up with. Rapid ideation is the terminology that everyone uses. Lots of post-it notes, lots of fun games going on to come up with as many ideas as possible. But then by the end of that process, drilling down to a core element of the ideas. Again, with the make phase, testing out lots of different things. Mr. Dyson, when he was inventing his vacuum cleaner, went through 5,000 prototypes before he came up with his final solution. So again, lots of different testing, and then drilling down those tests to a specific core service, and then grow. To be honest, I think we should cut off the right-hand side of that diamond, because we just want everything to grow. We don't want it to go back in again, but it wouldn't have looked very elegant if we had just left it as half a diamond. Now, this is something that I will show at the beginning of a design process, saying here is a process. These are the steps that we will follow. And then I will ask people to trust the process. And this is one of the things that is most difficult to learn, is to, with a design process, is to stick with it and to trust it. Because what you have in a design process is this. At the very beginning, it's messy. There's lots of thinking going on. There's lots of ideas floating around. There's lots of stuff that we're trying to resolve. And often we will spend a few sessions in a little bit of confusion. But that's fine, because the process is designed to bring that into a coherent end idea. And so again, if people are feeling a little bit worried about the process or where they are in the process, we can discuss that that process actually leads to an actual thing that they like, an actual thing that is feasible and viable. So I'm just going to go through some rationale about areas within the process, but also, rather than dig deep and showing you resources within those processes, because to be honest, if you go on the internet and Google them, you will find lots of different things that you might like the look of. And really, it's not for me to tell you what you should be using. It's you to find out the thing that works for you. As we go through this, you've seen a couple of little resources that I use, and so you'll be able to Google them. There's hundreds of different organizations punting them out for free. You can download them. National Mind, if you go on their website, I haven't been there for a few years now, but I assume it's still sitting up on their website and it's free to use. But there are some really strong principles if you are going to co-design or you are going to co-produce something with service users that you need to follow. And my experience of doing this now for 10 years is that it's really, really important that you stick with these principles. Doesn't matter what you're using tool-wise or resource-wise, these principles are the key for success. So we know that we can start our little journey of co-production or co-design, whichever we're calling it, because we have drilled into the problem that we are trying to solve. And that is really important to explore fully. It may be to say, well, people aren't receiving enough support at home. That's lovely, but what is the crux of that problem? Let's drill deeper. Why is that a problem? What is affecting that problem? What's causing that problem? Because until we really dig deep, we could just be either chipping away at something on the surface when there was something far more meatier that we should be looking at, or we could just be going around designing the wrong problem. And whenever I've seen design problems fail, it's because they haven't been looking at the right problem to start off with. The second thing is have some idea of where you're going to solve that problem. You might not know exactly what you're going to come up with because you're in the messy zone. But what you are trying to do is actually say, this is the problem that we're trying to solve. If we solve this problem, this is what we're likely to have in place. And that's big. It's a high level view. You don't have to have, it's a one sentence. And then also, thirdly, we know who we want to help us. It's really important that you get the stakeholders in early on. And that means if you are working with service users, they're right here now at the beginning of this journey. You don't add them onto the generate phase. You don't add them onto the make phase. You don't bring them in at the very end unless you're doing co-production only. If you are wanting them to be part of the design process, you need to bring them early on. And so therefore you need to know who you want to help. It's not about asking staff or sending out a generic email saying who wants to do this. You may well decide that this is a specific problem and that you need people who have experience around this particular area. And I have seen really successful co-design processes work because they've been through an actual recruitment process. And when people have said, oh, I'd like to be part of that, then they have gone through a process where they've explored their ability to be part of that design team, because you want everybody in that design team to be able to participate at a level that actually brings value to the piece of work. Again, it might sound harsh, but you don't want to be doing something tokenistic. You want to ensure that everybody is involved in the process. We'll come about how we help people do that in a couple of slides' time. What you've got over here, though, obviously, is something that we use often, which is a stakeholder profile. And you can see that if you look carefully, it is in the setup phase. The idea is we identify a stakeholder. We want them to be involved. So we do a little bit of an empathy exercise, trying to work out what they're trying to achieve in their life, in their goals, in their work, the opportunities that it brings to people, what we're going to ask that person to bring, and the offer that we give that person for being part of the design process. That helps you have a conversation with the relevant stakeholder or the person that you want to become part of your design team. For me, one of the most important things, if not the overarching, is the principles of co-design and the principles of co-production as well. If you are looking at genuinely telling someone that they're going to be part of a co-design process, then these are the 4 principles that I would recommend that you have on your arsenal, but you may also want to add other principles as well. But these are the 4 that I will initially start off with. 1, it's non-hierarchical. It's really important that everybody in the process is operating at the same level. There needs to be participation where people can see that what they are providing is adding value. That might mean that right at the very beginning, if you are doing a design process, you take, and you're doing that with service users, and you may well be having professional clinicians or doctors or staff who do this every day. You may want to do a few sessions with your service users to bring them up to speed so that they understand the background to the rationale of being part of the design process, what some of the resources are that people have had access to, potentially even a little bit of research to start off with. If people feel that they are not on a level playing field, then they will disengage, and that's not fair on them. Secondly, you prioritize the relationships within your peer design team. It's really strong that people are engaging with each other, that they feel that they have something to offer, that they feel that they are being involved in the relevant processes. So it's really important that that relationship that you have with the peer designers and the relationships that they have with each other are really focused upon. The third one is participation for all. How unfair is it that you have someone that's sitting there at a table, not really understanding what's going on, not really being able to participate, or feeling that if they do participate, someone may make a comment or someone will dismiss it because it's not relevant. So again, your principle is that there is participation for everyone in there, and you build that into your process. And then the fourth principle, which is the fun one, is that we can all learn. People shouldn't be going in there to give out their knowledge so that other people can learn, unless they're actually in there to learn themselves. It's all about sharing experiences and sharing knowledge. When we open ourselves up to learning, that's when the really good, interesting insights come into our life. On the right-hand side, I've stuck up another messy process map. This is the intergenerational piece of work that I showed earlier. And the squiggly line was drawn by 3 11-year-olds who was, they actually added the word something lovely at the end of the process. But again, what we're demonstrating here is that perhaps some of the names may demonstrate their ages, but this is all the group of people, and how we just said, this is what we bring to the design process. And it's not about who they are or where they stand in, whether they're a teacher or whether they're a CEO of an organization or whether they're the facilitator. It's the things that we bring to the design process. Some of them are a bit eccentric, but it was all rather lovely. My thing that I always suggest to organizations if they are going to undertake a design or co-production process is to have a bit of a checklist before they dive in. The first question you should ask yourself is, do we have the capacity to do this? There is commitment to co-design and co-production, and that commitment is time, it is staff, it is resources. If you do not have the capacity to do it, it'll be half-assed, and that's not fair for the people involved in the process if they are service users. Secondly, are we confident? Everyone says yes, but are we really confident that we can do this piece of work? And it may be a challenge to actually answer that question. Secondly, are we capable? Do we have the right skill sets within our organization to do this? If not, do we need to bring someone else into doing that? The fourth one, which is really interesting, is, are we credible? Do people actually believe that what we're going to do, or what we say we're going to do, we'll actually do? There's a lot of time that you'll find service users complaining that they have been involved in multiple design processes where all the things that they have come up with, or all the ideas that they have shared, have just been dismissed or never been seeing the light of day. So an organization has to be credible, or an individual who's doing that design process has to be credible. And the fifth question, which is always the hardest for organizations to have to admit to, is there someone in the community that might do this better? Because you're doing co-design and co-production for a particular reason, and that's to produce a service which is better, more accessible, more effective for your service users. So why would you decide to go ahead with doing a piece of work if someone you knew could do it better? And that's a really hard question to ask for an organization, to give something up and pass it to another organization, because that organization may well have better connections, may well have better skill sets, may have better capacity. What we see on the right-hand side was a disaster that I witnessed, which was a co-design process where the organization had little capability to actually, they didn't have the experience. They were just trying a few things out. And in the end, what we had was this, which was a mess of different thought patterns. Nothing was coherent. So the service users were confused. They didn't feel that any of their voices had been heard because they couldn't see where it fitted into the bigger picture. Again, this organization would have been much better to try and pass that over to a organization that had some kind of experience and perhaps learned through that process rather than trying to dive in on their own. So really have a serious conversation about whether you think you have the capacity, confidence, capability, and credibility to do it, but also, is there someone else that could do it better? Because that's what it all boils down to, is making things better for the people who are using services. Finally, on my list of things that we should be looking at is, how do we know we're co-designers? Well, I think there are 6 areas where we identify ourselves as co-designers, and this is co-designers. So we're talking about peer designers, anybody that's involved in the design process. And these are the values you want them to bring to your design process. We value the experiences of everyone at the table. That has to be a given for a really strong process to be a design process or co-production process to be successful. We are curious. Enjoy being curious, because you learn so much from so many different people. The intergenerational work that I did with the 11-year-olds, I learned so much from that cohort of 11-year-olds and from a group of 70-year-olds around their perspectives of how their experience in life had shaped their view of the world. We value all perspectives, which means that sometimes some people do have things that we perhaps don't agree with, but if we value their perspective, they feel credible, they feel that they have been listened to, so they feel that they have participated. We like to learn by doing. We don't just want to sit on our backsides and looking at a computer screen. We want to be involved, doing interesting things, testing ideas out. It's around that organic way of learning. Number 5, we're back to the squiggly line. We are willing to be unclear while we discover things. It's the trust the process again. And as a co-designer, you will be acknowledging that actually things are going to be a little bit messy until we actually move through the process and things become more clear. And the most important thing, we are co-designers because as designers, we plan to meet people's physical, emotional, access, and cultural needs. Because if we are not doing that and planning that really deeply before we start a process, then we are excluding people from that process. So again, look at all the people that you want to be involved in your design process or your co-production project, and make sure that you are really planning for their needs. Now, part of this is because we're on a digital platform. So the question being, remote co-design, is it possible? I felt I should throw this in because of who's hosting this webinar. So 4 areas that we can do remote co-production. I have tried them during the pandemic. I have various thoughts about how successful some of those attempts were. You have your synchronous process, which is participating is working on something together at the same time in the same space. So during the pandemic, all sorts of leaps and bounds were made by Teams and Zoom, so that people could have Google, so that you had interactive whiteboards in online, you had virtual spaces, you had breakout rooms. That is possible to work with, but I'm going to give you a caveat a little bit later. There's an element of asynchronous where people are working on something together, but they're working on different times. This is a way that you may be asking people to look at something, coming up with a solution or coming up with an idea, and then they are doing that in their own time and then posting that back at a certain agreed deadline. that has a way of giving people a chance to work on things in their own time, although to a deadline. Partially remote, the nightmare of the hybrid piece of work. Some participants in joining remotely, while others are together at a physical venue. That has some advantages if you are working with people across great distances. But I think anybody that's been involved in a hybrid meeting understands and notes some of the problems that can be creating. And then there's the fully remote, where actually just everybody is working at different places, different times, different parts of the country, but no one is actually coming face to face at any point. I've never actually been involved in something like that. In the end, I've always ended up meeting up with people, and we've always then kind of come together. I'm not sure how effective that way of working would be. However, if we're going to try it, should we stick to some principles, because it's really important that we do. So if we are going to co-design something online or co-produce something online, can you adhere to your principles? Are you able to say, actually, this will include everybody, this will follow these principles about learning, and etc., etc. Secondly, you have to plan for chaos, because the number of people that will forget to unmute, or the number of times a computer will break down, or your Wi-Fi will decide not to work, or this morning when my camera decided that it needed to be upgraded or something like that, and it refused to come back onto my Zoom account. And obviously I'm in that position where I'm not going to be able to deliver something without a camera. One of the recommendations that I have on that is to reduce the amount of time required to be online. It's really tiring to try and do co-design online. It's really impossible to get people's ideas backwards and forwards. So you have to try and reduce the amount of online time. Send out resources if you're going to try and co-design online. Might be sending stuff to people's homes. They might need pens, they might need post-it notes, they might need some of the tools that you're going to use. So you have to make sure everybody has them. So it's really better to, if you're going to go for a co-design process, work out what people are going to need, box it up and send it out. Co-design online is not down to one person, because you need to have enough people supporting, and by the nature of your service users, they may be people that will need some support at home. If they are doing this from their homes, there may be people that will need support in actually accessing the platform that you have decided to use. There may well be people that may need some support during the process, and during the co-design process. And again, you will need someone there that can provide some emotional support or some practical support to someone. Online, is the playing field still level? Or are people going to be disengaging because the process is too confusing, or they don't feel that they kind of quite buy into the online virtual space? Another thing is about thinking about participants' privacy. Within a set place, you have your confidentiality agreements, etc. But if someone is doing a piece of co-design work from home, or if they're in a nursing home, or if they're in another community setting, or if they're in a library using the IT there, then where is their privacy around them? But also, I have on a couple of occasions someone share their entire email inbox on screen as part of a design process. So again, think about participants' privacy. What technology is available? Teams is the most bloated piece of software. I'm not sure I should be saying that. But if your computer isn't particularly fast, or isn't particularly up to speed, or is on the wrong operating system, then you suddenly find that there may be people who are unable to connect in online. And so you need to make sure that absolutely everyone has the relevant technology so they can participate, because once again, have you unleveled the playing field by using an online platform that not everyone can actually access? And then how do you manage people's breaks? Because people will get up and make a cup of tea halfway through something. or they may feel overtired by using the screen for a period of time. And then the final one is barking dogs. Barking dogs, curious cats, interested children. How do you manage that kind of interruption that may break concentration or may break the flow of your design workshop or process or whatever you're participating in? A few minutes left. I will shoot on through these things. Funding co-design. Oh gosh, this is the nightmare, because what I've just told you is you start off with a complete mess. You have no idea what you're doing, and then you end up with something lovely. You try telling a commissioner that. The case for co-design is often misunderstood by commissioning people or people with money. They really want to know what you're going to do, how many people it's going to involve, and what exactly is it, what are the impacts, what are the outcomes that you're going to be looking for. And it's really difficult to say, I don't really know yet, because it's got to be designed by people. So suggestions. Trust the process. You need to sell the process. You need to be able to say to people, this is the process and I have evidence. And the reason you're going to have evidence is you're going to start small. You can do a small little design process relatively cheaply, relatively within your own resources. You don't need anything flashy, and you can bring people together and you can go through a process and demonstrate that it works for you. The best people to engage with are the community. The most successful funding I've had for service co-design is actually going to one of these community events where you pitch to local communities and they ascertain who they're going to give certain funds to, because the community loves the concept of actually people being involved in things, people actually having a say in that, being able to participate. If you can actually engage with the community, that holds a lot of strength with some neighborhood-based commissioning teams. Find a champion, get a commissioner involved. We did a pop-up cafe with using some pitches that people had designed in a co-design process, and we invited a load of commissioners for a free cup of tea and cake. And commissioners always love to be fed, and they all turned up. And so actually out of that, we managed to find one commissioner that really championed us for a period of time while they were still in post. And we managed to draw out a little bit of money for them. But also then challenge the crap that you're being told when someone tells you, oh, we're doing a co-design event or a co-production event. If it's not one, then talk up, because people will be thankful to you in the long term. They might not like you at the time, but if people are going to say something is co-design or co-produced, it has to be done. So don't let people get away with it. And then you start getting the credibility that you need to be able to run those co-design processes yourself. Mindful of the fact, last slide, nearly. This is what I've learned over my 10 years of doing co-design. These are my 4 points. There's loads of stuff out there that you can use. They're all fun, they're all colorful, etc., but only use the ones you need to achieve your aims, even if they're the boring ones. Know what you want to achieve, use the right resources. Plan well, plan B. Have a few things in your back pocket. It may well be that you move through things quickly, and then you're ending up trying to do, you're treading water, trying to work out what to do to pad out your session. Have some extra things in your pocket that you can do to move those sessions, but also if it's not going in the right direction, have a number of resources that you can utilize to bring that session back. Don't just go with just enough, go with more than you need. Permission to have fun. God, the amount of time that you have to try and encourage, especially staff teams, that they're here to have fun, even it might be their working day. When people are relaxed and having fun, that's when you get the real energy in the room. That's when you get the great ideas. And the other one is, don't waste your energy solving the wrong problem. Straight back to the very beginning, one of the first slides, which says, make sure that you know what problem you're trying to solve, because if you waste your energy solving the wrong problem, then people lose faith in you. And this is my final thing. If you are not doing it properly, how might your participants feel? So if you want to do co-design or you want to do co-production, a webinar like this is great because you get to see the principles, but you need to actually take some resources, take some learning, find a friendly service designer, find an organization that perhaps can help you join a service design process. Or if you see a co-design activity going on, get yourself involved, get to learn how to do co-design, get to learn how to do co-production, or find people that can show you how to do that. And that's my final tip. You need to be credible. That's it. And I'm over time. I'm ever so sorry, everybody.
No, you're all right. No, that was brilliant. Thanks so much, John. We do have a lot of questions to get through.
I'm
We'll
really
get through
sorry.
what we can. And just a reminder to everyone, if there are any of those questions in the Q&A section that you want answered, do upvote them now so that we can make sure we get to them. Cool. I'm just going to start. First one was from Anonymous. How do you ensure you build this work? How do you ensure you build this into your work when you have very limited time to turn projects around?
Okay. The issue being, I think, in here is to actually start building up a resource bank where you have those ideas, have a general sense of what your organization wants to achieve. If you have, you know what the issues are facing your service users, you know what the issues are facing your cohort people. So that doesn't stop you having a little bit of a process of making sure that you can do some design work with people. There might not be anything and money at the end of it, but you may well actually have that evidence to show that you've gone through a process. So it is horrendous for small organizations because a tender comes out and they just want to show that you've engaged with people. But if you actually saying, I know what we want to deliver, I think it fits within this funding stream, or I know it can fit within this funding stream, and I can evidence that we have been through the process. And you have a little pocketbook of lovely things.
Mm.
It's a nice piece of work because it encourages and teaches your staff and your service users how to do co-design. And if you need to do something completely out of the blue, everyone's on a low playing field. I have seen design sprints done over a day, including the research. And it's possible, but you need people who really know what they're doing on that. So teach and do it as part and parcel of it, and make sure that you do give up time. I know we're all really busy, but actually this is fundamental part of your offer to your service users, that you are going to encourage co-design and their influence and participation in your services. Design that within your business model.
Cool. Brilliant. Thank you. The next one is a simpler one. How do you deal with projects or ideas that fail?
Celebrate them. Just where did they go wrong? What happened? I think in the process, there have been some that go completely off track. But if you use the process, you can potentially get rid of any issues in the prototyping stage. So in that make stage, you are prototyping, testing out. With the prototypes, test many times, fail many times, and then you only succeed. When you succeed, you only have to succeed once. If you try and drag things out onto pilots, or you get involved in something that lasts for a year and you're desperately trying to make it succeed and you know it's failing, what an absolute nightmare. So remove yourself from the long-term investment into the idea, look at the prototyping phase, test everything, test every weakness, every point of that, and then you know that you are in a position to potentially whatever you're going to do is going to succeed and your confidence is there. And if it fails, then don't moan about it. Celebrate the good stuff, work out what went wrong, learn your lesson, go back. The great thing about the process is you can always go back. So even if you're in your generate stage and you think, hang on a second, we're solving the wrong problem here, go back to the problem, go right back to the start. Don't miss out and jump forward, but always, if you need to, go backwards.
Bro, thanks again. Megan has a question, which is, how do you handle ideas that get brought up in sessions that are 100% not possible or realistic for you to implement?
What you do is you try and avoid that happening in the first place, because people have enough information and enough knowledge. When we did the service design with the 11-year-olds, the commissioner was absolutely in fear that they would come up with this swimming pool or rocket launching idea. But even the 11-year-olds, once faced with this is where we have to work in. These are the conditions that we're looking at. This is the amount of money. These are the resources. The design phase plays a lot within the desirable stage of a service, and you allow people in that desirable stage to have unlimited ideas. But then at some point you bring in what is feasible and what is viable. And then you can bring those ideas into that position. Once again, the prototyping stage lets you test that. And then not every idea has some worth. It's worth parking it somewhere, because if someone's come up with an idea and they've gone through the process, if they've just walked through the door and said, oh, we want this, and they haven't gone through the process, then it's not a credible idea. But if through the process someone's come up with something, it may well work in another way. And within design, there is a thing called Scamper, SCAMPER. Look that up. That's a way of adjusting something using, can we substitute something? Can we reverse something? It's an acronym. Google Scamper. It's a great way of reassessing your services.
Brilliant. On a similar very different note, actually, tips for gaining buy-in from senior levels of organizations, especially from budget holders. That's from Kathy.
You can save time on actually monitoring, because if you're involved in that process, then you have confidence that you can see the worth of that project. If you've just bought something, you have to monitor it to make it work, to make sure that it's working properly. So again, with those senior people, these are the most difficult people, because they always say to you, oh, co-production and co-design is really important, but it's not as important as this meeting that I've got to go to. You have to challenge them on that. Sometimes that's being a pain in the arse. But if someone tells you that they want co-production, you have to stand your ground and dig your feet in and say co-production means that you have to be involved, or you have to designate a member of staff that is able to make those decisions for you as well, and is able to bring your experience to the table. Get them involved in a process. Do a design sprint. As I said, when we set up the cafe, the commissioners loved it, because people were coming in there talking about the idea, talking about the process. They were getting a real sense. And often commissioners, much as they say they want to kind of be involved in the community and meet people, they don't get the opportunity. So create that opportunity where they can meet your designers, and so they feel confident that what you're doing is credible. And then have that catalogue of good things. Every time we do something great, even if it's teeny tiny, save it, promote it, shout it. Don't tell them once, tell them twice, tell them 3 times, tell them 4 times. They're not listening to you until you're bored with repeating yourself. That's when they start listening to you.
Handy advice for us all there, I think. Another question is, how do you ensure the right people engage at the right time in the process? So this person finds it difficult to get stakeholders on board at the early ideation stages, for example.
Yeah, so I think in some respects, again, it's going back to talking through the process with people. I always do a pitch presentation as to why I want people involved, but I also make it a challenge, because it is a call to arms. It's actually saying, do you want change here? Because you have to commit yourself time if you want change. Yeah, I am quite loud and quite extrovert and quite persuasive. That's why I got my job. And it's difficult if that's not your bag. But I think, again, if you have the process, if you are absolutely saying this is a problem that we're trying to solve and we need buy-in from you, and you give people a realistic expectation of what they're expected to do, then if they're not the sort of person that is going to go through that process, then they shouldn't be in your design team. You need them to feel that they are going to participate, they're going to influence. This is the thing that often puts people off is, oh, not again. No one ever listens to us. This is a process where you will get heard, but you have to follow the rules and the process.
Rob, I think we might have time for 2 more if they're short. One is, what tools do you use to help keep track of everything from the start of the design process to the launch of the project?
I want to show, because I'm probably not on camera. I have a pile of paperwork at the moment for the landing space, which I have got to catalogue and I have got to record. Photograph, picture, take photographs of absolutely everything. and record your session plans down, record your outcomes. The process will lead on to things coming down to a point, so you don't have to record all the big ideas at each end of the session. What are the core things that we've come out of that session? But photograph, photograph, photograph. Commissioners love it, especially if they're in one.
Right, so a camera is the tool.
A camera is your best tool.
Right. And this one's the last one, and it's just because a couple of people in the chat mentioned payment as well. So what are your feelings about paying service users to take part? Other people have mentioned things. Do you have any general thoughts on that?
Absolutely. In fact, a piece of work that we did with about mental health within the perinatal period, we paid people 250 quid a day for being our experts, because they're your experts by experience. Now, you have problems because people on benefits, often you have to find a way around that with voucher schemes and stuff like that. Perhaps find a friendly person at the DWP. I know, hard, but find someone, see if you can find out what the workarounds are. If you need to pay people because you are getting paid to do it. Your staff are getting paid to do it. The commissioner sitting there is getting paid to do it. Why shouldn't the people be involved in that? That encourages people to come in. And when you're paying people to do stuff, you're expecting them to actually commit to it as well. So yes, if you've got the finances to do it, then absolutely. I know finances are really tight, but perhaps you can pay people in a different way. There's a good bartering system involved, etc., etc. But yeah, these are people with lived experience. They are your service users. There's no hierarchy. They are credible. You want them to participate. If you can pay them, absolutely.
And someone else mentioned food as well as gift cards as well. So seems like
food's an essential. It'll always bring people to it. And if you want people to generate lots of ideas, last tip, get lots of sweets and lots of prizes for people. And then if certain cohorts of people come up with the most ideas, give them food, give them prizes. It encourages people. Always have food around. I'm giving proof of why that's the case.
Thank you, Jon. That was really great. Just the final bits from us. Just thank Jon again, and thank you to everyone who attended. Just to say our next event on the books is in partnership with Avast, and we'll be sharing about how charities can invest in robust cybersecurity on a shoestring. That's on the 29th of May, so a week today. We'll pop a link into the chat if you want to join that. Finally, if you could share any feedback, that would be fantastic. We'll be posting a link in the chat soon. And
if anyone wants to follow this up, I think my email address is floating around somewhere, or we can provide it. I might take a bit of time to answer, but I will answer every question.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions we'll send you that we didn't get to because there was quite a few. So we'll send Jon's email around to everyone if that's all right with you, Jon.
Yeah, it's fine.
Cool. Thanks again, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your week. Thanks very much.